running African, and what a special morning. What a beautiful morning. I feel extremely and especially blessed. I don't know if I should just be very calm or overly excited, and I'm just kind of in between. So I'm just going to set it right here. So welcome to the studio. A very special guest this morning, a dear sister, a dear friend, a dear mother. We call her Yeye, and Yeye means something, so it's not disrespectful. When we say Yeye, we've gone way beyond nothings. We'll tell you about that, and that's why we need to understand our language. Yeyefini Efunbolade is in the house. Yeyefini, as I said, is a dear friend and a dear sister, a spiritual coach, cultural consultant, author, lecturer, life coach, and president of Yeyefini.com Balanced. Is it Balanced Living? Yeyefini is also an ordained priestess, so this is something that we should know, and we'll talk a lot about that this morning. She doesn't like to talk about that, but we're going to go there this morning. And she's in the house with us. Yeyefini, Yeye, Mama, morning.
Good morning.
Greetings.
Good morning. Good morning. Alafia.
Alafia. Good. Look at that. How are you doing, my sister?
I'm blessed. Very, very, very blessed. I'm so happy to be here.
This is surreal, but we're going to talk about that later, because we first of all are going to clear the space as usual. We had the libation and the devotion that we usually have every morning that we've been doing this for many, many years, but a special libation, meditation, devotion live this morning from you in the space as we cut and clear.
Okay, thank you so much. Today I'm going to pray and give honor to our ancestors and the divine forces of nature known as Orisha. And I'm going to pour water as I invoke the ancestors and invoke the presence of God and in all of its aspects to give us inspiration, for us to grasp inspiration and discernment of the power that lives within us and lives outside of us. And when we connect, that is the presence and the grace of God. Omi tutu, ashe tutu, ile tutu, ori tutu, egung tutu tutu la roye. Mojuba olofi, mojuba olorun, mojuba olodemare. Olorun alabo sudaye, olorun alabo sunife, olorun elemi, olorun alaye. Moki akoda, moki asheda, moki aye odun, moki odun loni, moki odun lola. Mojuba baba, mojuba iya, mojuba yeye, mojuba ara, mojuba bogbo wano lodo ara orun, ibaye bayen turun, ibaye bayen turun, bogbo alakba, ibaye bayen turun, bogbo enya kikbo nisisi, mojuba bogbo ariku, awon ariku, alagba, kide ni Jamaica. We give honor and praise. We give honor and praise on this day to Mother Earth, Father Sky, and to all of the elements of nature. We give thanks. We give elevation and light, and we pour libation in remembrance of our ancestors. At this time, everyone can call the names of your ancestors, those who you knew or who know you, but you don't know them. Call the name of your ancestors that you remember, and those ancestors that had an impact in your life. Mojuba, Bobo Ariku, Edile, Efunbolade, Rodok Aiken, Atikbobo Edile, Kifunwa, Agbara, Alafia, Mojuba, Ibaye Turung, Ibaye Bayen Turung, Bogbo Alagba, Ibaye Bayen Turung, Bogbo Ariku, Timbelese Olodumare, Adupueo, giving Father thanks for this opportunity for us to call on the names and the presence of the Most High. We give thanks and honor to the expression of the divine known as nature. We give thanks and praises to our ancestors whose shoulders we stand on. We give thanks on the ancestors who are not yet born. We give thanks to the ancestors who have done the work, continue to do the work here in Jamaica and globally. We give thanks and praises for the magical work and the majestic work that is coming through the airways right now. And we pray and we invoke the ancestors to infuse their power and their energy and their presence in a peaceful, loving, and powerful way to each and everyone that's listening to my words, that will hear it in recording, that will hear it through friends. May the things and the words and the inspiration, which is our intention, is to elevate our ancestors, elevate our consciousness, and elevate the concept of peace is what you've earned, what you deserved, and what you have accessible. Ashe, modupwe, Ashe-o.
Ashe-o. Our libation and prayer live from Yeyefini Efunbolade. A quick break. I'll be right back. All right, we're back with you inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running Africa, and just about 29 after 6 o'clock. What a beautiful morning. In studio, Yeyefini has written one of the most riveting books that we've seen come out of the spiritual realm, the Pan-African realm. It is raw, it is honest, it is riveting, it is deeply personal, and it is a narrative that sheds light on the shadows of human suffering generally, even as Yeyefini brings to the fore her own personal suffering, but also on the power of spirit, the human spirit, the spiritual realm, the African spirit, understanding self. So even while I called Yeyefini yesterday after I was through the last word in the book, the last credit, I read everything from the acknowledgement right to the last full stop. And I called her and I said, I've done everything. I've laughed, I've cried. Sometimes I don't know if I should jump up. I just get up and walk away and come right back and read a book. And it is, sometimes I'm in awe. And I remember especially going through one of her chapters and saying, we've been friends forever. I did not realize some of these things. So this Yeyefini is a deeply personal and honest biography. This is deeply personal. You've taken a decision to just, as you said to me on the phone, you said to me last week, I just lay it all out there and, you'll see it when you read it. So we have that with us. We have that book with us in hand right now. Yeyefini Efunbolade, The Living Shrine is the name of the book. What a beautiful cover too. The cover says so much because it embodies everything that is in the book. Even just that spirit and that energy that's coming off our sister Yeyefini. So much there. And I want to, I know the divination was done about this program because you do nothing without the divination. And I know that the divination was done about even you being on the island in Jamaica. And that is why when we made a commitment to use this space in honor of your work and in tribute to what you have done over the years, we decided we're going to cut and clear, and we're going to clear the space. And I know it was within that conversation that you would have done the divination. And this is why, for all those who asked for interviews this morning, and I looked at it and got back to you and said, listen, no, it is because I understand spirit. And when a divination is done about a particular space, we keep it that way. When I was reading your book, I recognized the extent to which that was part of your own life. And I know that when you were here on the island in Jamaica, that when we were scheduled to do anything, you said, well, I'm going to do the divination and come back and let you know. And that would be done, and we would then determine how to go. And this is what we are missing in the space in terms of our spirituality, in terms of who we are as an African. We're missing the input of the elders and the input of the priestesses and the spiritual guides and the spiritual leaders to tell us, help guide us where to go and how to go. There's a lot of that in the book, so we want to start with Yeyefini at the beginning. We're going to get to the meat of the matter as we go along, but we're starting at the beginning. One of the things that you point out in the book, Yeyefini, is how the book is configured, and that is well noted. So it's your story, but it's splintered through the book is so much about our the Yoruba traditional way, our own spirituality. In that there's so much that we can learn from this as we go along. So while we are learning about your life and gaining insight into who you are as a spiritual leader and being encouraged by your story, you have also interspersed through the book the spiritual systems and how we can gain from knowledge from this book. Talk to me about that. Why was it important to not just write a biography and get right to it, but to preface that in different chapters with information, critical information about our traditional African practices?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, the book is written as both a memoir and a textbook because there's so many people today who are involved in African traditional practices. People who are called through their sleep. People are called through just picking up their phone, and spirit just connect them to some type of thing that connects them to the understanding directed to the universe, but in particular to people of African descent. You can go on Google and just put up African practice or African religion, African sociology, whatever, and it always comes back to the fact that as African people, we believed in a certain way of dealing with each other and dealing with ourselves, which is to know yourself from a spiritual perspective. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote this with my intention was not to have a Pulitzer Prize or not to be the number top seller, to get a movie produced, that was not my intention.
Although we can feel the movie.
Yes, well, if it happens, that's the ancestors deciding that's it. But my intention was I wrote it with this concept of Brenda on the bus, Brenda and Bernard, two different people who, Brenda and Bernard are not together. This is just Brenda as a female, Bernard as a male that can read this book and just happen to stumble up on this book and can identify with what they're going through, looking for a way to understand themselves from an African perspective. And so Brenda is on the bus. She don't have a car. Bernard is on the bus. He doesn't have a car. And he doesn't have a car because at this time in their life, they're on the bus. They're taking public transport to get from point A to point B, wherever it's to pick up the babies, drop them off at daycare, go get the unemployment check, whatever it is. But Brenda and Bernard, these are concepts that the everyday man, and that has always been my calling. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Though the ancestors have put me in places where I have direct access to people on very top echelons of life, but that's never been my intention. Yeah. My intention is the local person. Like yesterday, the tour guide wanted to take me to see the different parts of Jamaica. I said, take me to St. Anne's Bay so I can go to the market. Mm-hmm. That's where I connect.
Yes.
I connect to the locals. So this book, the intention is for everyone and anyone that has ever buck up into or that their spirit led them to understanding as an African, God looks like you. As an African, your ancestors lived through you.
And that we get throughout the book. Your own journey teaches a lot. And I want to start at the beginning in terms of who you are physically, your material manifestation point, if you will, because we embraced you. You were here in Jamaica for a very long time. We know you had an accent, but we never stopped to find out which part it come from. Because I was your friend, I knew you were coming from America via Panama via America. And so you actually grew up in Panama, born in Panama, grew up in Panama, and left Panama when you were a teenager. So I want to go back to Panama to talk about your experiences there, which you have laid bare in the book. Talk to me about that. One of the things you pointed to first of all was that your mom's pregnancy, your own birth, was, should we say, not wanted? That and on both sides, that you thought that it was always your dad, and then later on to recognize that there was this thinking from your mother. Let us start there. And what happened between your mom and your dad, which you've laid it out in the book for you, this beautiful spirit to come into the world.
Okay, so my mother's story and my father's story are typical to people of the diaspora, people who are descendants of our ancestors who were captured or were enslaved. And the experience for the descendants of Africa who are in the diaspora is one of disconnection with their original self, disconnection from family, disconnection from their support. And so I was raised and born from, on my mother's side, both grandparents on my mother's side are Jamaican. And from my father's side are Barbadians. And so as many people from the Caribbean during the time of the building of the Panama Canal were looking for some way of making an income, a better way of life. And so in that challenge, their parents moved to Panama. So my parents were then born there. So you're speaking about people, a generation who did not have any support system. My mother left Jamaica. My grandmother, Ida Ruddock, may she live in glory. And my father, their ancestors, my mother's mother didn't have a support system. She didn't have any relatives in Panama. And back then to write a letter, it would take weeks to get back and forth and that kind of thing. And so not having any support on both sides, you're dealing with people who have been wounded, trying to come together and find love. And get married and have babies, and in the midst of trying to build a canal and people dying in front of you, all of that, you find compassion and unity. And so that's how my mother and my grandmother and grandfather met and had my mother. My mother now is still the second generation of that kind of challenge. And so when my father, who suffered from, of course, his parents died when he was 12, and my mother's mother died when she was 6 months old. Try to figure that. And my mother had one sister that was 12 years older than her. So you're looking at people who are just trying to grasp at life, hold on to life, live in communities where all of the Caribbean people are holding on to the values that they knew in Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, wherever it is that our ancestral Africanness came together, using herbs to heal, using the things, the songs and the things to keep us alive. And so my father, trying to make sense out of nonsense, became an alcoholic to numb his pain. And so in that process, my mother, as his wife, was at the brink of whatever demon was affecting him that moment. And so my mother had 2 children before me. And when I came along, my mother had planned to leave him because he was abusive, emotionally and physically. And so she wanted to be able to leave with one child on one hand, one on the other. One night he came home and decided, and she had been trying her best not to have, any kind of potential child again. And so from that, he came home one night, and she, the way she told me the story is that, she did not want to be pregnant, but he forced her. You know, and back then you can't just say, no, I don't feel like having sex. You know, the man is like, no, this is mine. You're my wife. As a matter of fact, in Panama, I don't think they do it anymore. But when you were married, you became the name that you had to take your husband's name. It was D-E, meaning belonging to. So my mother's last name was Rodok Aiken of my father's name. So she became like the property. And so if a man is saying, okay, we're going to have sex tonight, and that's how I was conceived. So my mother did not want to. I didn't know that. When as you were mentioned, when I was initiated into the priesthood of Obatala 53 years ago, I was told that the Odu that I have, which is, for those of you who know this faith, in the Odu of Ofung, it says that one of your parents, you know, you were not a planned, or one of your parents did not want you. And I was like, whoa, must be my father, because he beat my mother and that kind of thing. Later on, my mother explained and told me this story. When I was recording, and she didn't know that I was recording, because when I asked her, could I record it, she told me, no, those things I don't want to talk about. So another time that I went, I had the recorder on, because I needed to hear her story. My mother's 104 years old. God willing, she'll be 105. She remembers everything from the past. And so that was my story. So we're dealing with coming to the understanding, why is it that the disconnect? Why is it that I always felt of kind of way that I was empty? Why is it that I didn't feel that my life was something that was this glorious thing? And then to understand why, spiritually, that gave me a feeling of peace. I understood then, and looked at my mother with a different set of eyes.
And so that everything that you are now, everything that you experienced in the physical led up to literally who you are now.
Correct.
This journey is what you have laid bare in the book. You speak about growing up in Panama, coming in from other parts of the Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean, and underscore the dangerous or the dangers of colonization, and how wicked that played out, or wickedly that played out in Panama itself, where the Spanish colonizers are there's classism. So the Spanish colonizers see themselves as descendants of the Spanish colonizers as the top of the pecking order, and the lower, the more you get to Africa, the lower you get in
Correct.
terms of that social ladder. And you talk about how that played out in your own life. You also talk about the name, and so your father's surname at the time, which came from the enslaver in any case, and how that the rejection for you, even of a sound of that name, led you on a path of discovery. Help us to understand that process. One, what part, so many of us can identify. I told you many years ago, my own granduncle was in Panama, working on the Panama Canal. That's a story. In our family, we understood that you know, people were going, and there were songs made about it. Colon Mana, Common, others. Songs made about what was happening there with so many of our people going to work on the canal. Some came back, some stayed. But we didn't talk about, and we still haven't spent time talking about, the dynamics, the racial dynamics and the class dynamics that played out there in Panama. You are one of the first persons that I've seen, and my education might be lacking, but you're one of the first persons I've seen laying this out so succinctly. So help us to understand what that whole foment was like, of those who came from the Caribbean to work on the canal, and the Spaniards, well, those who were speaking Spanish, and the descendants of those from Spain and wherever else, Latino or whatever else they call them, and what was playing out there in Panama.
I think it's, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to share this, because it's something that resonates with so many, as you say, not yet born, but organized genocide has always been one of the tasks that we will have to acknowledge and say and see and do what we can to be present, to understand that this is real, that it happens, and it continues to happen. So for me, being a descendant of people from the Caribbean and going to school in Spanish language because of the colonizers, the dominant culture being Spanish, well, I think that they're in the attempt of genocide. Their attempt was bring the Caribbean people, build the canal, and somehow they'll leave again, or they'll get away. Just as right now, there are concepts of us just somehow disappearing. And so, because of their own lack of knowledge, of understanding of the evolution of spirit, and how when you are grounded in who you are, and as a race of people, we are always going to survive. And so for us, when you're from the Caribbean and you were living in Panama, the whole identity that you had was to crush anything that tied you back to the Caribbean. Because remember, the Caribbean people were the revolutionaries. They were the one that was killing and burning the cane fields and that. So anything that showed power and community was a mindful decision to destroy that. So when you come to Panama and the dominant culture of white people, their whole understanding is keep them down. They had the same kind of practice that was practiced in South Africa was the same one. That was same thing practice that was practiced in America in the South, where to live, if you live on the canal zone, if you work for the canal, you had to have a pass to shop in the grocery stores. And then the grocery stores on the canal zone, they had them separated. They had gold and silver commissary. If you were white, you shopped in the white commissary. If you were black and you worked for the canal zone, you were never always right there on the top. You always have to remind yourself that you're on the bottom. So if you were caught on the canal zone and you were a Panamanian and you did not have a card, you could go to jail, and the person whose card you were using could really lose their job. So it was always that same kind of thing that's in the South that exists now. That there's always that group, that the dominant culture is always making you feel that there's going to be a few of you could make it up here, and giving hope to the lower class that if you try hard enough, you will be like the one that we chose to be up there to be the example. But in the process, the whole system is about debasing and destroying. So having a Caribbean name, having a name like Roach, Aiken, and Ruddock, for me was a target as to make sure that this one does not make it. Because there was a president in Panama, I can't remember what year it was, that was giving money to anyone of Caribbean descent to change your name to Gonzalez or whatever Spanish name it was. My grandfather, may he live in glory, this is Jamaican, said, "Nah, sir. Nah, sir." My grandfather said, "No, I'm not changing my name." So my mother's name remained Ruddock and Aiken. You know, Ida Ruddock and Caleb Aiken from Jamaica. They said, "No, we're not doing that. We're not changing our name." And then 3 generations down the road, we don't know who we are. So they said, no, we're not going to do that. And so there are those people who kept that name. And today, through the evolution of time, some of them are representing Panama all over with Caribbean names. Those ancestors, we have to mojuba them and give them credit for them not being sold out for $5 to change your name and change your identity.
To a Spanish name. And this is
to a Spanish name.
And let me take a quick break and come back, because you also write about how the Caribbean people who moved into the United States, is your own experience going into the United States as also a teen, but an older teen now, how that played out among Caribbean people, so-called Latinas and European Americans and so on. Special edition this morning as we speak to author and spiritual coach, consultant, life coach, president of Yeyefini.com Balanced, an ordained priestess, Yeyefini Efunbolade, has written her biography, The Living Shrine. And we're talking about that, but there's just so much more that the biography is leading us to, that we're spending some time this morning to explore a lot of that. So that your experience in Panama, Yeyefini, that was one as a child. But by the time you were what, 16? Was it 16 or 14 that you left?
14.
14 to go into the United States. As a teenager, you recognize that this discrimination, classism, racism, played out in even a more broader context in the United States as a child. I'm going to come back to Panama, but make a comparison for me. What years are we talking about?
Well, I was actually 13 and a half. But we're talking about 1961.
Yes.
Yes. And so we're in the heights of the Black Power movement when I came to the United States. And I was in junior high school. And to come here to see the same kind of racism amongst the Latinos, because within that, you're living in a Caribbean neighborhood. We stuck together for community because that's what we knew. So when you move from Panama, you find your Panamanian neighborhood and you're living with that. But even within that, you come and you realize that the racism is still here. So you're having me looking like an African and being able to understand and speak Spanish for me was always very enlightening, in that people would be speaking about me and I'm standing right there and they don't know that I speak Spanish, and I turn around and speak Spanish and I'm like, oh my God, oh, we didn't know, and so because a lot of times people don't think...
Tell me the word. What's the Spanish word for I know what you're saying?
Yo sé lo que estás diciendo. O yo entiendo lo que estás diciendo.
Entiendo. Yes, I read that in the book. I laughed. All right. So you speak Spanish fluently, of course.
I went to school from the first grade, from kindergarten really till 8th grade was in Spanish.
Yeah.
Today my children think it's so cute because I can't do math in English because Because, when you memorize your times table, you do it in Spanish.
Oh.
So for me, it's been planted so deep that whenever I count or I add or subtract or multiply, I have to do it in Spanish. And then in that process, I translate to English.
Wow,
Isn't that something?
It is.
And that's how it is that we are... Mm-hmm. Sometimes we believe that we are not of this system, but we are of this system because we are programmed so deeply that unconsciously there are parts of your brain that just ascribe to that thing.
Yes. Can you imagine if we were learning timetables and we are the first who discovered mathematics, if we were learning in our different Bantu languages or Igbo languages, or if we understood ourselves in those contexts, which is what you went in search of at the end of the day, and found yourself smack in the middle of Yoruba and the Yoruba languages, which was part of the Igbo tradition, I suppose. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a while. All right.
Let me just interject here. Something I think is important is that we see the same racism happening right now today. When you look at Univision and when you look at any of the Latin Telemundo, and that, you don't see any black faces that speak Spanish. They're always white people, and the jokes that they have on the side is about black people. So you watch with intention to understand how subtle racism is till today.
Mm-hmm. One of the discussions that we have been having in some of the groups that I belong to is the extent to which there needs to be a coming together and a reaching across the Caribbean waters to the Spanish-speaking, those of our neighbors and those of our brothers and sisters, those lands where as Africans, because we're talking about Ma'afa, we're talking about slavery, our ancestors were taken everywhere in the Caribbean and colonized in Portuguese and French and Spanish and English and so on. And we are still separated. They did a job, and it was deliberate, so that those who speak English, the colonizers' tongue, those of us, say, in Jamaica and Barbados and so on, we are not in touch with our neighbors in Cuba. Look how close Cuba is to us, for example, and Panama, and just the so-called Latin America. We say Latin America, and it's so far from us. So there is this need in terms of, if we're going to, as a people, reconnect and be the change that we want to see, we're going to have to cross the waters and reconnect with each other. The power lies, I think, in that kind of a unity. So that process it's ongoing. There are people who are doing it, but not enough. And you're bringing this into stark contrast for us to help us to understand. Because here you are, somebody who we know as a high priestess, a Yoruba high priestess, who has been steeped in the African traditions for so long, but came out of Panama, Spanish-speaking Panama. And if you didn't find your way to Jamaica, then, So there's that connection. All right, Marcus Garvey did that. More and more, because we see with Costa Rica and so on, and even Panama itself, that we still have branches.
My mother went to Marcus Garvey School in Panama.
Tell us about that.
Well, the unity of our people has to be a constant intention set by us. Because the dominant culture does not create a place where we can find the power, the energy, the interest of us coming together, because coming together means power. Remember, Kwame Nkrumah was trying to unite all African nations. And so when we're looking at coming across and reaching to each other, and that we have to first understand that we are African. And for those who do not know that they're African, then in time they will. This is the thing. The intention of unity has to be understanding that there is a system in place for us to be disunited. And we have to use the same tools that our ancestors used, which is the knowledge and the practice of African spiritual warfare. If we do not call our ancestors, if we do not hold their graveyards, if we do not hold their memories, if we do not teach our children who they were, and if we are not conscious of the lack of power that we're doing for ourselves, the watering down of who we are, if we do not use the same methods that our ancestors did in uniting through rituals, through ceremonies, through contacting the ancestors and using the energy in the ancestors, we won't be together. So the unity of all of us has to be a movement, has to be a movement as to how we are going to use African spiritual practices to overcome the system that in place to subjugate us. And it's so subtle, but it's so powerful. We see it in the music, we see it in the art, we see it in everything, the expression, the hair. Everything is about making us feel that we are not good enough. When we come to the point to understanding the power of it, I speak in the book as to knowing the power of pouring libation, going and calling the ancestors and having things happen right here in Jamaica, having things happen all over the world where I am called or where Spirit takes me to pour libation, to do rituals, to do a reading, to say this is the way we're going to come together, and it has been done. Our ancestors did not decide one day to come and burn down a plantation because we didn't have nothing to do that Friday. We knew that the way that we were going to get it is we're going to get their attention, and we're going to continue, and we're going to continue, and we're going to continue. That's how Haiti liberated itself. It didn't ask Massa for permission. That's the only way we're going to come to liberation, is when we come together and actually use the tools that our ancestors have within our being, within our souls, that we wake up in the morning and don't know why we choose to do X, Y, and Z. Our ancestors are begging for us to recognize them. And when we come together with that understanding, that's when liberation will start. We can fight them with their own weapons because it's of a different war.
And this is laid out so well in the book, because you've walked that pathway that led you to this thinking. The race and class and colorism in Panama. You went into, as a teenager, into the United States as a young girl, coming out of that discriminatory environment, and to follow your mom. But before you went into Panama, you write about something that I didn't know, because we didn't speak about this during all of our days of creating havoc on the island here.
Literal havoc.
Yes.
Hiding.
But you, as a child, as a young child, were molested. Sexually molested as a child, and you write about that in the book by another young girl. As you said, you talked about what she looked like, an older girl, 16 years old. You were just a baby, actually, and this must have been difficult for you to bring to the fore, Yeyefini? What did it take to bring that out? And I know it's something you'd have dealt with over the years, but to put it now in the biography, how?
I had to put it in there, and I guess that's one of the things that I had to deal with. That's one of my demons that I had to really deal with, go to counseling and through ritual ceremonies and things to deal with the fact that the shame that is attached to that. Molestation, rape, abuse, psychological just debasement of any human being has to be dealt with in a way that you acknowledge it for what it is. It's something that happened to you, and so what you going to do with it? Mm-hmm. And I think that's why it took me 17 years to finish this book. It's because I've always been writing this book in my mind. Like, I got to tell my story. But that part is the part that was raw. Is the part that made me later on recognize that held me hostage as to never coming to my authentic self. And when you are a priestess or a teacher or a guide or a mother and you're suffering within and quietly suffering, it's going to spill all over the floor. Mm-hmm. It's going to spill because you're trying to replace that pain, that emptiness by bringing people in too quickly, assuming that they're supposed to understand all of the stuff that come with when you're abused and not being dealt with. And so in my journey, I recognize from just that trauma, how it played out in my whole life. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that part of my life had to be spoken about.
Yes, yes.
And it had to be spoken because there are people, there are children that have been through that. But it's more about what my journey was and why it opened me up to the fact that you have to heal yourself first before you try to heal people. You can be a priestess doing reading, doing all of that stuff. But if you have that one thing dragging you through and presenting it to you as to something you got to deal with, you got to be honest with yourself.
And one of the things that came to me as I read the book at 5 minutes now after 7 o'clock, thank you for joining us inside of the Africa Forum. As I read that part of the book, I thought to myself, well, okay, so this is here, and I know that there are many others who read this book because one of the things in our community that we have to deal with is incest and child abuse and child molestation and sexual abuse and so on. This is something that in our community we have to face and to deal with it. We have not managed to cauterize this problem. It's something that I've been covering for over 34 years. And in my 34 years as a journalist in this space, that I've been practicing journalism all my life, but in this space, this is an issue that I've been covering, and every year it gets worse. So it's not getting better. We have not managed to address this in the right way. I think one of the things is the more of us persons like yourself, Yeyefini, who reach where you are, the level of practice, a practitioner, to come out now and to say, listen, I was molested as a child, and here is my journey. That it will encourage more people to speak out. And I think it is within the speaking out that we probably will find a way to change this. Mm-hmm. It is a pretty serious thing in our community.
That's Brenda on the bus.
Yes.
Brenda is reading about herself on the bus.
Yes.
And Bernard on the bus. And they see themselves and they're able to say, oh, wow, me too. Mm-hmm. Okay, I can become that. Mm-hmm. One day I could be successful. One day I could be flying all over the world. One day I can be showing people how to hold on to hope. One day I can show people how to love, how to forgive people who trespass against you. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So this book is about inspiring you that never give up, because the Spirit of God, and wherever you are in this moment, and I'm speaking to someone right now that's listening this airway that feels they are alone in their darkness, you are never alone. Your ancestors are right there with you. God, in whatever form or name you call it, is right there with you. Acknowledge it. Call on them and ask your great-great-great-great-grandmother to come in to help you. My mother never knew her mother by face. 6 months my mother's mother passed. My mother prayed. She told me one of her constant prayer is, please don't ever let me die while my children are young. My mother's 104. That's the power of prayer. That my mother has lived to see her children, her grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. So right now, whoever it is that's feeling disconnected, trust me, do not give up on yourself. The spirit of your ancestors, the spirit of the universe will hear you Call their names, because as long as you call your ancestors' name, they're alive and they want you to succeed. My grandmother left Jamaica so many years and I'm still talking about her.
And as you say that, one of the things that you underscore in the book is the role of elders in our community. Your own relationship with your grandmother, Granny, and your Auntie Pearl. And you talk about the role that they played in your own life in helping to center you when you were going through some of your most challenging moments as a young child. So that, and I know something that you've talked about all the time, the importance of elders in the community. It is something, Yeyefini, that we're losing now, and I suppose we can look at it later on as we go through. But how important were the elders in your community to your own development?
That's the glue that holds you. That's the glue that holds you. That's the people that, in African understanding, the parents usually don't raise the child. It's the grandparents, because the children who are raising the children, they're still going through who they are, opening up to who they are as young adults. When you have Granny and Mama, they have the opportunity now to know what it's like to be a parent, and they'll hold you and squeeze you and forgive you and make you do things that your parents would not, because they know what it's like. They know the danger. They know the damage that if you don't do certain things. So they would always do. So the elders, that's the thing that's going to hold us together, is acknowledging the elders, is acknowledging that they are the storehouse of what not to do and how to get to where you want to go. Mm-hmm. They are the record. They are the holders of it, and it's so important, because that's the thing that Granny gave me, is the understanding that there's always love. She never, and she was Miss Coakley. She was from Jamaica right here, and the feeling that I always felt was a safe place, was that there's somebody that loves me in spite of me having this big secret about being molested. She made me feel like, wow, whatever is happening to you, that's just a story. So for years, I didn't even recall this. For many years as an adult, I didn't even remember.
Locked away in trauma.
Yes, that trauma was so deep in me, I did not even recognize it. And it was in the middle of a ritual that it came up, and I said, oh my God, that's what happened. And it was like, bing! Yes, so all these years, I always felt an emptiness, that I wasn't good enough, and there was something wrong with me, and there's something there's a shame, there's all of this. But Granny made me feel like, that was home. That was safe.
And you talked about Auntie Pearl too. Auntie Pearl, who was your father's sister, and so she would be the Barbados side.
Yes.
And this happened when you were staying away from your mom's home, because by this time your mom had gone off to...
No. That was when I was a child.
Oh, you were a child? Oh, yes, she hadn't gone yet.
We used to go to spend time with them.
Right.
For the summer and weekends.
And you know what I found interesting is that you enjoyed going to, you say in the book, to Auntie Pearl, but at the same time you talk about, it was when Auntie Pearl died that molestation stopped, because the access that person had to
when
you.
Granny died, that was it.
Because Granny died?
She didn't have access to me anymore, because then she couldn't come around, because Granny wasn't there for her to sleep at her house. The girl was about 18.
Wow.
And so, yes, and I was about 6. And so there's certain parts of my life, of my childhood, I don't remember. I don't remember. And the thing that made me feel so good when I went to stay with Aunt Pearl and Granny was there is that there was fruit trees, and there was things that we could do. We would go down, Aunt Pearl had other properties, and we would go down to visit, and she would take us. We would go to the river. And so my being a person that loves nature, I think that was my escape place. So today, if y'all saw on Facebook, I was in the river. I was rowing I am
not saying anything.
I was rowing the man's boat, and he was sitting down.
If anybody asks me, I don't know you.
And then before that, I was staying in Kingston in an Airbnb, and the man next door became friends with me because he had mango. I begged the man mango, and he was throwing it down on my skirt. That's who I am. I love nature because that was my safe place. And then come to find out that nature is where Orisha live.
Yes.
So I had been directed to all of that, because the first time that I felt spirit was with the Benjaminite church, as you know, in the book. And it says that I was sleeping and I smelled the Kananga water and the chanting and the women wearing the colors and all of that. And I felt at home. That's when my mother had left and I was so lonely. And I felt that feeling like Granny. I felt that place that whatever is happening now, for this moment, this is God. This is home for you. This is safe. And that's why I always gravitated to anything that felt like spirit infused or felt that it made me feel like I had something wrapped around me. And that's why in my music, I state, your Odu is your cloth, is that when you know who you are, and your Odu is just a binary mathematical system to tell you why you were born, how you will be living, and that kind of thing, your taboos. And once you know that, then when you know what your power is, then you can relax. And you know anything that's going on around you is a distraction to you connecting to the fact that you are God. You are connected to God. Your word has the power to bring anything and anyone that you want into your life.
All right, we take another quick break, and when we come back, we talk about Yeyefini's life in America, leading her into polygamy. And this is an interesting thing. I'm glad that you spent so much time talking about that, because we needed to understand how that works. We hear a lot about the villages in the United States and other places, but outside of the continent of Africa or countries that we know where polygamy is practiced, but in the United States. But what you have done for us in the book is to lay that out clearly, the pros and the cons. I'm speaking to my sister friend, Yeyefini Efunbolade. She's a Yoruba high priestess. Her book is out, The Living Shrine, going through the book, going through her life, understanding the path, but also in this conversation, understanding more about ourselves. Yeyefini's journey is our journey. Her struggle is our struggle. Her triumphs, our triumphs. She represents the African mother, the African woman, the African sister, the African daughter in the space. And we're happy to have her in the studio with us. Yeyefini, in America, you... I know you had a conflicting relationship with your mom, as you have mentioned a few times here this morning, but also I think we can get back to that later on when we spend some time to look at that mother-daughter relationship. But also, you went into America and went into high school, so of course you got lost the first day and walked like 50 miles out of your way, and police had to carry you back home.
Let me say, I'm so grateful that you took the time to read the book, because you have the details that you know that sheds light.
I was so sorry for you. I said, oh goodness, oh my, I really empathize with the little girl in you. So you didn't cry out? I mean... Anyway, so it's in the book. You have to buy the book and read the book. We're not going to talk about everything in the book. Please to buy the book. But ultimately you went into tertiary studies. And I want you to talk to us about when you began to... You talk about first time you felt spirit all the way back in Panama as a child. When did you begin to recognize your African self, to coming out of this discriminatory situation, but also out of a Christian background? At what point? Was it in Panama or was it later on in America? Because you talk about the American studies in the tertiary institution.
Okay, so it's a cross. When I was in Panama, as I said, smelling the Kananga water and hearing the Jamaican people and Caribbean people singing and moving, that felt so good. And the way, in retrospect, I saw that was God and spirit and the ancestors guiding me to a place to know that you will encounter this someplace else. Yes. I didn't know that. I just knew that it felt good. My mother wasn't there, and this made me feel good. And it was just so beautiful, because right after that, I left Panama. My mother sent for us. And so coming to the U.S., right after that, I'm at the World's Fair. I'm 14 years old. I'm in the 8th grade. No, it was 9th grade, so I was 15. Mm-hmm. And at the World's Fair, they had a segment they called the African Pavilion, and I'm there and listening to the music, and all of a sudden I start shaking, and I don't know why I'm shaking, and I feel cold.
Yeah.
And the drummer who may he lived in glory, Olatunji, from the one that plays the drums of Passion, he came over and he said, I later found out who he was, but at the moment he just says, you're feeling the spirit of your ancestors. That was the first time
so
that I felt that.
So he recognized that you were going through what we would have called Mayal in Jamaica.
Yes.
Literally.
I was actually in possession.
Yes.
And I says, whoa. Okay, well, like I always say, I tell the ancestors they need to stop this because this ain't cool. This is not cool because all my friends are looking like, what the hell is wrong with her?
Yeah.
So from then, it just opened up a way for me to understand. So by the time I get to the 12th grade, to the 10th grade, and I'm now in junior high school, I meet this person and they give me this book about Africa and about Mandingo and Master Falconhurst and Drummage, a series of books that just opened my eyes to spirituality. And I started studying everything that I could about being an African man. You remember, we're in the 60s, we're black and I'm proud and all of this. Yes. It's just mixing with all of this. People are wearing dashikis. I'm just in a place of just complete exposure to the rawness of Africa.
And you read about Angela Davis.
Yes.
And these are some of the people who were in your space.
Nikki Giovanni. We are into, Leroy Jones, all of Muta, it was just all of these things that were just filtering me.
Permeating the space.
Yes, so I started going to the library, the Schoenberg Library in Harlem, and seeing how we mattered. We were in the books. We were the founders of everything. Egypt, what? I didn't know that coming from Panama, so that was an awareness that just blew my mind. And so this book just led me into it. So by the time I get to college, I know about African spirituality, sociology and that. And so I meet the last poets, Abiodun, who is still in New York doing very well.
Yes.
And Abiodun from the last poets comes to A&T doing homecoming, and he's doing his poetry.
This is you.
That the revolution will not be televised, and it was just all of this, and I'm like, whoa, this is fantastic. So we speak to him, and he says, I know where you can get a reading. I'm like, oh, so I was aware of readings. I didn't know where I could go. And he knows that I'm from New York because he was from New York. And he said, when you go back on semester break, you can go to Harlem. And I got my first reading. Exactly what I'm doing now. Kabu is exactly what they said I would. I would travel the world and talk to people about the culture. And I'm like, that's not what I want to do. I want to open an art gallery and just be, Pan-African and go all over the world. I was not intending to teach adults.
And I like the way you kind of led us into that reading, making that comparison between Harlem itself and is it New York or other parts of America, but Harlem and the kind of the black confidence that you write about, that you saw in Harlem. You talk even about the architecture of the buildings, or how they were different, but that black people, as you write, and African Americans were living a different kind of consciousness, understanding themselves more. And what's her name? The sister who did the reading, Mama Keke.
Mama Keke.
Mama Keke. You spoke about her too, but later on in the book, and that reading you said for you was you heard it, but were you scared of what you heard, or was it that you pushed back at that of some of the things she said to you?
I think I was most scared of her because I wanted to know, how could this woman tell me stuff that I'm going through right now, and I don't know her from nowhere? And then look at the ancestors. The woman was from Barbados. What? That's not a coincidence. A priestess of Oshun. May she rest in glory.
But when you describe that whole scene, it reminded me of that movie, The Matrix, when Neo went to see if he was the one. I know you don't see the movie, but people will understand. Those who see the movie will understand. When he went to find out if he was the one, and he went through all these different places and then went into a place and saw this black woman. Mama Kiki reminded me of that black woman who had that discussion with Neo about whether or not he was the one.
That's exactly how I felt.
That's
exactly how I felt. And in retrospect, when I look back and I think of Auntie and I think of my father, Mama KK looked like them. Light-skinned woman.
Yes.
Bajan, very Bajan attitude, accent, everything.
Yes. But what did she tell you?
She told me that what I was doing was, I was doing some of everything, smoking weed, doing some of everything that I was not sent to college to do. And so she explained to me that if I didn't get initiated by the time I was 23, that I would die. I was like, what's she smoking? Because I couldn't understand how this woman is going to know. She told me that I would be great in this practice, that I would be an amazing priestess, that I would initiate people into the priesthood, that I could be better than her. I'm like, I don't want all of this. I come into your house, I got to take my shoes off and all of this, but the fear that I had of her is that I knew at some level she was speaking truth through me. I knew it. I knew it because it would not have had that effect on me if I was like, oh, she's crazy, and I would have walked out. But that thing stayed with me. And
you said in the book that at the time you were also corresponding with the Baba from the village.
Yes,
and that was just letters, just
letters.
But that the two things. So he was saying to you. They both spoke to you about the importance or not of education,
right? Of
staying in school, getting your degree, finishing up, and taking on the world. But both said different things. One was saying, walk away from Babylon system, in other words,
right?
And the other was saying, stay and see this through,
right?
So Mama KK was saying, stay.
Right, because of her age, she was thinking in terms of in the future, she's an older woman, think in terms of your education, how you can bring up Caribbean people, how you can help our people to come. And in Harlem, the movement was about Pan-Africanism. So, Nikki Giovanni and them, they're not speaking about staying in school. They're like, be aware of what's happening in our system. Yeah. So when the King May, I was writing with Osadraman, he was telling me, you don't need to stay in school. They're just indoctrinating you into a system that is not of your own. You have to find a place to find your Africanness. So I was right in that place.
Yeah. So how did you work that out? Because these are two people you respect who are coming from two different spaces.
Okay, when she put the eleke or the beads around my neck, she says, I'm going to give you this Obatala bead to help to guide you as to where it is that you need to go and that kind of thing, protect you. I took the beads and that, and I went back the next summer and was working with her, and I was still torn because I started working with her in her store in the summers, and I was still torn as to this is not making any sense for me. Harlem looks good, but that's not what my heart is. And I'm writing this man, and he's telling me I'm building a village. My idea is to get some land. He didn't have the land at the time, and to come and help us build this village. Well, the effect that it had on me is that I chose.
You made a choice.
I made a choice, and the choice was to leave college.
And to go help to build the village.
Yes, to go south.
And that's South Carolina.
Right.
And what was this village that was being built?
Well, by the time I got there was his wife and two other people.
No, before that, what was the idea of the village?
The idea of the village is that if we're going to have the power of African people to make a change, we have to have our own land. That the people who are living in the cities will be able to support it because the system, the dominant culture is always about keeping you intact.
And that's what resonated with you, as you pointed out in the book.
That's right.
To own land.
Own land. Have your own thing. Raise your children speaking the language, wearing the clothes, knowing who they are. Don't have any European person teaching them how to write their name for the first time. That for me did not resonate with what truth was. And so that was the thing. The land, getting land, living on the land, raising my children, potential children, all of that was about moving to the land.
And by this time, let me take a break and come out. But ultimately, you made a choice to go to South Carolina and to create this African village on land owned by ourselves.
Right.
And we're adding to the Running African Book Club reading list, The Living Shrine, Yeyefini Efunbolade, The Living Shrine. It is available on Amazon. You can get it by Kindle, so it's a one-click, one-buy, and read it immediately. As Yeyefini has been saying all morning, pretty easy to read, and also a wonderful read too. It's a fulfilling and satisfying read. The Living Shrine. Yeyefini, so you made a decision to go into South Carolina.
Well, there's a break between there that's very important.
Yes.
So when I left school, I went back to New York, and I started working in an African daycare, and gave me another connection to Africanness, and just all the things that we were doing were Afrocentric. Was an African-centered daycare, preparing children to go into the system school, but with the hope of them creating home-based African-centered class schools. And one of them was the East, and that was very successful for many, many years. And so in that process, I started getting involved with other Pan-African organizations, and I was on my way to Africa. I wanted to go to Africa.
Yes.
Since I was not, in school, and my mother and I was that was out. So trying to go, I was going to Africa with CORE, and started the planning for that, and boy and behold, I got pregnant. That was God.
But you said this was planned.
I planned it.
Yeah.
I planned it. I was like, I got to have a child. Because after working with these children, I'm like, oh my God, this is so fulfilling. And, still getting away from me teaching adults. Because I said, I'm not teaching any adults. Because you can't teach adults anything. But the children concept, that was so beautiful. So it was really intentional. And so God answered my prayers, and I got pregnant. And so when I got pregnant, the whole process was, by then I started getting myself readings in my pregnancy, because by then I had the Harlem community had a temple, an Obatala temple, that was started by the then Osageman, he had gone south to purchase land. He was not on the land yet. He was still living in Eden, North Carolina when I was writing to him. And so by the time I got pregnant and started getting readings by my godfather, may he rest in glory. So when he read me, he says, well, I'm going south, and you can come if you want to. By then I couldn't go to Africa with CORE, because my best friend, she left and went to CORE. I couldn't get the shots necessary to go we were going to Ghana to live. And so by then the readings were saying, well, once the child is born, we're leaving, and not once the child is born, we're leaving, and it just happened that my child was going to be born.
Yes.
After my child was born, my child was 6 weeks old when I left New York with my godfather and 5 other people, and we moved south. By then,
you mentioned in the book that there was someone in that group who moved south who you expected that would have been for you a partner.
Right. That was the intention. That was the conversation.
Yes.
But by the time we got south, things flipped. Yes. And he decided, no, that was not going to be the case. And so in my story, you hear of some of the horror, some of the things that I went through in the process of living in a village, a single woman with a baby. What was set up for me was, again, another part of not knowing your worth.
Did you know this was a polygamous village when you left? Because you were leaving with someone who the expectation was that this would be your partner. So you weren't single in the. Well, you weren't married, but you weren't a single woman. You had a partner in your mind.
In my mind, at least, I had a partner that was going there. I was not even thinking about no polygamy. I was like, okay, we have this. We're gonna have, because he was a friend, and he was not the father of my child, and he was a friend, and he took interest in us and that kind of thing. We all moved in the same way with African Pan-Africanism, and so by the time we got there, that was to my surprise. We never discussed this the 3 days before. And I get there, and I'm a single woman raising a child in an African village.
And so he had gone ahead to say to the leader that he didn't want to marry you.
That's right.
So he'd made that clear and had moved up. That left you in a situation where, what was your choice? To go back, or to? Yeah,
it was to go back to New York.
But you had left everything in
in New York. Yes. Everything. The spirit moved in such a way that the apartment I had got flooded, and it was not about going back to anywhere. And I could not go back to my mother, because you know the story is we had always been challenging to each other, and so it was either go back to New York, crawl on your knees, and go back to your mama and said that you made a mistake at 23 years old. Come on, or you're going to stay in the village, and the rule was that if you stay here, you have to have a partner. Well, with him saying, the young man saying that he was not going to be dealing with me like that, I was like, heartbroken. I was just like another letdown in my life. But it was really another pickup by God.
Yeah.
Because in that moment, I was told that I had to become what was called a concubine, not a wife, a concubine of the king, because you have to be under the protection of a man.
You have an entire chapter in the book entitled Wife or Concubine.
Right.
And that is straight out of a K-drama.
Yes, that's just straight up drama.
Yes.
So by the time I then ended up into that union of polygamy, that was when I can say that my life and the chapter that talked about polygamy, what it was about and what it is about.
And we're not going to delve into it and get the book and read it. It's interesting because you talk about the woman who came to you to say, marry my husband. And what that meant, what marriage meant in that polygamous village was not a ceremony, but was just having sex.
That's it.
And you talk about how he spent 3 nights, and you refused, but you had the third night was the
third time they came to me, because the first time they came, the second time no, the third time I just say, either this or you go home to your mama.
Right. And you talk about how that made you feel.
That's the need for elders. That's the need that you need. You need an elder that you can call and she can say, well, by then I tore my drawers with Mama KK, so I couldn't go back and say, oh, Mama KK, can I come stay with you? And now, by the way, everything that you told me was true and I have got a baby. My pride would not let me do that. I was like, come on.
So you stayed in that village?
Yes.
As a concubine?
Yes.
Were there, as far as you know, and I'm moving a bit, other similar villages across America?
No, this was the only one. And until today, it's the only one. It's not, of course, the same magnitude or the same influence, but it was. And that was the first African village, because when we got there, that's when it actually became a village. Other than that, it was one man, his wife, another older lady, and children. So when we came, that whole tribe of the whole group of us that came, the 6 of us that came, then it became an actual community with other aspects of a community, other families making the community. So that's made the village.
It's important to read the book, because the whole description of the village, and I suppose you talk about the role of women, the role of men, and male-female relationships. That one of the things that really stuck in your craw, as I heard it coming out in the book, is that is a misogyny in the village, and
yes.
So that was difficult for you.
Very difficult, because in knowing what it's supposed to be, knowing, because I studied it years before, and what it actually was, and I'm like, wait a minute, are you running a game on us? So the argument was always about, so where do women come in? So myself and the same wife that asked me to marry, we became very much about building a community where women can find their strength and their identity. We had the Women's Society, we have Women's Rites of Passage. Those are the things that we created together, because she didn't do it by herself, because she had to have someone that is representing what it is that we're talking about. So it with likes, dislikes, jealousies, envies, whatever, there was always a bigger reason why we were together as a family. It was always a bigger reason why we were as we call it, co-wives, is because it wasn't about him. It was about what example are we setting for women who want husbands, who want to have children, who don't want to be, as the new term that I can't stand, baby mama, that come along. Women who want to have husbands, women who want this culture that identify with being African, and not losing their last name. That's what are we doing? Are we going to argue over whether he loves you more than me, or are we going to set a platform for women that when they come to this village, the misogyny that's going on, that used to be 2 years ago. As of today, we're going to move differently. So, and the other wives would come in and that kind of thing. I made sure that they had parties. Some of them are alive now, and I dare you to challenge me, because I made sure that they had some semblance of a wedding, of some part, if it's just an acknowledgement rather than what I got. Because I figure anytime I go through something, it's for me to either take it as truth or make it the truth. And so I made it the truth that no, you can't just roll up on somebody because you feel like you don't have any other position. You have to honor them. You have to honor them with respect and with dignity.
So this village exists to
yes, to today it is, and it's not as what it was, and there's struggles in it because when you don't have your elders and your leaders are gone and the elders are no longer, the children are raising an understanding based on their understanding. And it's limited, so it has its challenges. But it's still there, and people can, go there and see the festivals and the things like that are reminding us that we can do this. There should be other villages. By now, we should have 10 of them, because I've been doing this thing for 53 years.
So that beyond the polygamy, there is a self-sufficiency. There is what Molimu Marcus Messiah Garvey talked about, which is how to be self-sufficient.
Yes, that was the idea and the concept. But you can't be self-sufficient if the people who are coming in, you have to re-educate them as to being African. And the leader of it has to be educated himself to humility and connection to what it is that he's teaching about, going back to Africa, getting back and forth, and learning that was not existent. And so
how you
it
treat
became
women. And how you treat women.
Yes, and how you treat women is, and that kind of sociology was not available. It was not available. So the women, the pioneer women from there, that's what we stood for, is that we were going to make a mark. But if you have the governing group geared towards keeping women in the same kind of position, then sooner or later everybody started leaving.
And one of the things you write about, and it's not just in the village, but it happened in the village, is food stamps.
Yes.
That women had to fend for themselves in this village. They weren't allowed to own land, so the lands were bought in the men's name.
That's right. And that's when I me being me, I said, okay, so there's a rule there has to be a man from your family. My brother came. And so I got my own land. I said, no, we're not go there.
And just before we go to the break, you were finally, at some point, after staying there for 15 years? 15 years in a polygamous relationship, other children coming through, beautiful children coming through in that space. You talk about your children a lot in the book too, so that's there for listeners to learn more about them and what they finally became, your pride in your children. But you talk specifically about a birth that required a C-section and how the decisions around that finally drove you to leave the village and what all of that entails. Let me take a quick break and come back. Now, 7:47, and with Yeyefini Efunbolade. What a conversation. What a book. The Living Shrine, Yeyefini Efunbolade. Get your copy. It is now on the reading list for the Running African Book Club. Make sure you get that. It is available at Amazon, and you can also get it by Kindle. So as we are speaking, you can just one click. Because I saw we buy things from Kindle, don't it? One click and it comes immediately. All right. So at some point, 15 years in a polygamous relationship. I can't even think of it. Yeah, I cannot think. My mind, But I in reading the book, we begin to understand though, because it was more than the polygamy. It was building and creating
community.
An African-centered space.
Yes.
But at some point, 15 years, you had to leave. What drove you to leave?
Well, as I said, when the leader loses the vision or forgets what the mission is, then everything starts falling apart. Like in the book, things fall apart.
Center cannot hold.
Yes. So Chinua Achebe says that. Yeah. So things will fall apart. And so things started falling apart because as we got older and as we started, I was not the little 23-year-old, I'm 15 years in deep with 3 teenagers looking at me like, so what we going to do about this? And so he started making rules and decisions that started affecting my children. And that's when I said, no, make I have to go.
Yeah.
I have to leave. And so in leaving, by that time, I became the head of many of the different things. I became the head of many of the temples of the market. I had my own market. I have a thriving practice. I used to do consultations and that all over, in Atlanta. I had a vibrant practice. And
so you had really grown in that space.
Oh, yeah.
In your spiritual self. And you were, one of the things we didn't talk about was that you were initiated also in that space.
Right.
As, what was it again?
A priestess of Obatala.
Right.
Right. In my initiation, that was the beginning of me knowing that there were greater things ahead for me. And some of the things Mama KK had said were now coming to pass because I was able to learn. I was able to learn different. I knew the value and the blessing and how Orisha ancestor, it's like a chess game. Why is it that the ancestors would make sure that I was born in Panama? Because I was able to read Spanish. And most of the books about this faith and the practice of how to do divination and all of that, back then, in the 70s, there were none in Yoruba. Right now, you can look and you can find it in the Isheshe practice all over. But before that, it was only Lukumi. It was only in Santeria, quote unquote, which is really Lukumi, which is the Cuban version of this faith. That's where the books were written. The ancestors made it that I was the only one in the village that spoke Spanish. So whenever we traveled, we got books, and I learned how to divine. I learned how to read. I started having clients. I started traveling. And so my priesthood expanded. And people, and the knowledge base that I had was, of course, culturally, I learned a lot in the village, but in terms of my spiritual development, I saw how God was playing a role in my life to re-identify who I was and to give me that feeling of that emptiness that I didn't know what it was from. It was filled with a new family. It was filled with people who loved me, who I thought loved me and depended on me, godchildren, my co-wives. We had a family. We had something that I could call success. And so by the time I got ready to leave, the village was in a place where many of the people were leaving, but the rules and the laws started being shifted by ego more than spirit. And I saw, for my own safety and my children, I decided to leave. The then leader was very upset with me because I was the head of the school of divination. I became the head of the Obatala temple. I became the head of a lot of things that were going on. And so my leaving was a blow to his ego and a blow to what was going on in the village, in that it would leave a gap, a very important gap, because I always believe in education. If you are told the truth, then you know how you're gonna choose. And because of that, he was very angry, and that's when I became persona non grata.
And you have an entire chapter entitled Persona non grata for our listeners to kind of look at to see what happened there. We'll talk a little bit more, Yeyefini, but let me back up a bit, because through the book, you reference the schism that arose as a result of how people were understanding what was coming out of Lukume and Santeria from Matanzas out of Cuba, as opposed to the understanding of shrines and all of that in the United States. And the role that played in even people's relationships, whether people stayed or they went, or how people got along, that there were distinct differences, that there were schisms coming out of that. And I thought about this when I was reading it, that might be your next book. It's going to take a whole lot of research, but you lived it. That whole period when people were trying to reconcile what was coming out of Santeria and Lukume as opposed to what was coming out of Nigeria, what our ancestors carried, and what was understood in the United States. But briefly, can you tell us what that whole schism was about?
Well, you're talking about people whose base is, as far as we can understand or remember, not understand, but as far as we can remember, we were Americans, African Americans. We're living in America with the concept of America, where the church, Protestantism, and that was the basic concept. When you're dealing with Lukumi and Santeria coming out, it's a way of life, but it's under Catholicism. So the hiding of the culture under Catholicism presented something that we could see the potential of using it and finding a melting place. And that's what, because as a matter of fact, the leader of the village was initiated in Matanzas. So he was initiated into Lukumi, and then was always Pan-African. Meaning to say that was always Pan-African, came straight out the Garvey movement, because his mom, mother and father were Garveyites. So he was raised a Pan-Africanist. But at this time, there were not people initiating in you're talking many years ago, was not initiating people into the Isheshe or African system. So he went to Cuba, got initiated, and right after that, the embargo. So it was shut down. So he could not go back. And then we started moving towards more coming into the African understanding through Olatunji's music and Yoruba being a word of understanding and people going to Africa. And the religion existed in New York through spirituality, misas, and spiritual connection. So it started opening up. We're talking about 1959. And so that we saw how African people of the diaspora were using Lukumi as a way to get connected, but the whole intention was to take it away from Christianity and Catholicism. Take it away from that and own it that it is African. Why do we have to hide it? Let's not call Shango Santa Barbara. Let's call him Shango. Let's remove him. But then you have the older people who are like, if you remove him from Santa Barbara, I can't go with that. So there was that struggle right there within Cuba.
Yes.
But the African-American boldness coming out of the 60s, knowing that we have the strength and the power to change, we started then infusing it and getting rid of Catholicism and calling it purely Yoruba or Ifa or Isheshe. And so today a lot of people are arguing whether they're Isheshe. Now, the base of what you find in the diaspora now, where people are so aware of this new culture called Ifa and Yoruba, it started with the boldness of 3 women in Cuba who took the systems and put them together and made a rule of expectations and goals that we could initiate and bring the African faith that were brought to them in the enslavement period and create what we call today Lukumi. But it's the same thing. It's the same branch. It's children of the same mother who were taken different places, and we finally uniting and finding what are the differences, what are the similarities, and let's join in together. And that's the fusion that today we have. The next understanding is that just as you said that we need to unite as people of African descent and knowing our power, we have to stop arguing about who is God and what God is. Whether it's Isheshe, whether it's Lukumi, whether it's Shango Baptist, whether it's Condomble, it's all the same parents. Get to the root of it and knowing it's number 1 is community, number 2 is ancestral veneration, knowing that we as a community, we owe it to our ancestors. And thirdly is how to raise the level of expectancy of how we are going to create a world for Mother Earth. What are we doing with the earth? How are we going to leave this to our children? Knowing that nature is our future, then we have to deal with that. And that's where Orisha comes in. So how is it that we're destroying the earth or cleaning the earth or holding ourselves accountable to what is happening to us? That's Orisha.
We're speaking with Yeyefini Efunbolade. She is a Yoruba high priestess. The book is called The Living Shrine. There's just so much there. Because in addition to telling us your life story, there's so much of the history that becomes available to us. For example, this whole conversation about what was the discussions in Cuba as opposed to what was going on in the United States and in the diaspora and so on. I didn't know about that. And I thought there's just so much there to unpack because, and as you point out now, we have to stop arguing about who is God, the schisms. We have to really get rid of that and think about how we are going to better ourselves, as how we're going to unite, how we're going to do this as a people, what's best for us and for Earth. That these conversations we're going to have to begin to have. We see what's happening now in China, for example. China is having this Africa-China conference and a Sino-Africa conference, and they have 50 leaders from the continent of Africa. Now, how many states, how many countries in Africa? How many countries? They've got 50 leaders from the continent of Africa attending that conference. It tells you how the colonizers, because China is a settler colonizer, and the oppressors, how they are continuing to go after Africa's minerals, which is our minerals, our land, and what we're losing in the entire process while we argue over who is God, who are Christian, who baptized, what color you are on the spectrum, if we can still pass the paper by color. These are the things that African people are arguing about among ourselves, and in that process, denying ourselves as Africans and denying ourselves of the land. China is doing this at the same time America has got in on the whole thing, because they have now said, well, they had their first Senior Africa conference really recently, and they're now about to have another one. So we have Europe, we have the EU, we have China, we have the United States, and all of them. This is 1884 all over again, but this time we are sitting by allowing this to happen. I'm making that point, Yeyefini, because of the point you raised, that we are going to have to get to a place where we stop talking about the petty issues and think about the things that can unite us and the things that are best for our community in terms of our own progress.
Mm-hmm. That's why I wrote this book as a textbook. Yeah. I mean, it's an easy read, and I could have gone into a whole lot of deep, juicy stuff, but what good would it serve?
Well, that's for another book.
Yes, a whole nother book. And so, what you say for the next book?
Yeah, for the next book. I know what you're going to have to write about this whole schism.
I know. So, but this is what I had to get it out. It took 17 years and I had to get it out.
Yes.
So that's why I made it a textbook, because the way that we're going to be able to understand the reality of what's happening and the arguments that we have to educate ourselves. We have to know facts. And because while we are arguing as to who's God and who's this and who's the other, they're studying us.
Yes.
They know the pattern.
They're taking the land.
Yes, the pattern is, that's the one thing God not making more of is land.
Yes.
And there's no thing outside of Africa that could be recreated. When they just found the largest diamond in Africa. So unless we understand the power of knowing who we are, stop fighting amongst each other and get the education as to who we are. Trust the systems that's going to help you to recognize who you are. You will not be using a pawn in a chess game that you have no way of winning. It's set up for us to be the ones who buy the people's hair. It is set up for us to do the things that, to fight amongst each other. It's set up that there are only 5 families that's running everything. And in between there, you have people who are made believe that they have the potential to become one of the 5 families. And in the lower part, you are just the workers, is another way of modern enslavement. We have to be aware of that. And without education, that's why education was so important to keep us in the enslavement period. We could not allow to read. We were not allowed to read because we knew that if you give someone education and facts, they will be able to figure it out. It ain't that deep. It's not that deep. If you know the truth and you have facts, then you can say, well, okay, this doesn't go there. This doesn't go there. Let's move together, because obviously we are being placed on the 8 ball.
Yeyefini, let's go a little bit back now to.
I'm getting ready. I'm going on the other side. Bring me back. Please bring me back. The Pan-Africanist. Bring me back.
No, we're backing and forwarding because we don't have any choice. And that's what the book is too. And this is why I like, you say it's a text and it's a biography, but it's also a text. And so much is there. So when you left the village, Oyatunji, you you were named persona non grata.
Right.
That's kind of cultish, because this is a kind of cultish behavior.
Yes.
It reminds me of the Church of Scientology. So when you leave, you are literally cut off. How difficult was that for you?
Well, it took me a while to understand that Obatala is the one that put me out, not them. There's nobody that can stand me, that can stop me from doing anything. And throughout the book, I give all kinds of situations where, people took my orishas, threw them away, whatever. But here I am still looking fabulous and fine at 77, yes.
Let me tell you.
Look at my Instagram. You're not talking. But anyway, let's get back. Yeah. So it was hard because what I thought was truth turned out to be a lie that was right in front of my face, and I did not recognize it. When I realized it was the truth is when I told my children we were leaving, and I said, I have something to tell y'all that may break your heart, that we're leaving my children were, do we have to take all of this? They were like,
they were ready. They were ready to go.
They knew what time it was, because a couple of things that happened was the me leaving. But I didn't know how it was going to happen. And as you explained, for me, readings is everything. Because readings mean you're taking me into realms that I don't see with my eyes, with my limited experience, but I'm a trust spirit. So spirit said it's not time to leave. And I struggled those 3 years of wanting to leave and couldn't. But when I finally did, it was very hard, because everything that I created that gave me life, that made me see that it was right for me to do what I did, where I left the church, I got involved with African spirituality, and I ended up in a dogma that was just a complete lie of what it is that we're supposed to be doing, what the intention was. So it was very, very difficult. I had to face it. And from that, my children went through all types of different things, but they were so good to me that they didn't get in any problems, any troubles, any police, any drugs. And for that, I'm just grateful, because we talking about right when crack was introduced to the U.S. is when I left. So I was teaching, when I was teaching school in Charlotte, the first crack babies we had in elementary school. So that was a whole period that Reaganomics was just creating to really take over what we had in our black communities. Well, let me come back. So it was hard for me, because my children had to have a new reality about who they were. They had to defend themselves in school, educationally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. They were challenged, but my children showed up and made it. For me, it was difficult, because I had to look at the lie I was living and try to make truth of it and make my children believe that I was not crazy. That whole mix that's when I had the nervous breakdown and all of that stuff I explained in the book, is that it was part of that. The breaking point is not a nervous breakdown. It was God bringing me up.
And these are themes that you raise in the book, mental health, and how after being made a persona non grata and coming out and in this pressure cooker, literally, to make it and to lift your children up at a time when drugs was being introduced into the African American communities, that your mental health was challenged. You talk about going through a nervous breakdown. What is phenomenal to me, Yeyefini, is how you managed to weave all of what was happening from the beginning, from Panama all the way to Reagan, and say no to drugs, but drugs was being pushed into the community, and how you yourself, at a point of being at your lowest, found yourself as Dr. Feeney? Was it Dr. Feeney that you became Dr. Feeney?
Dr. Dr. Yeyefini.
Dr. Yeyefini.
Oh, you're not gonna go there.
Well, you put it in the book. So, I'm gonna go there because you put it in the book. So who was Dr. Yeyefini?
Well, yes, Dr. Yeyefini became this person that took care of people that were lawbreakers, that were trying to carve out a reality from drug law breaking, all of that. So I was the person to come to do readings and to get the law situation off of them. So my name was downtown. I hope they can't get me on retrospect.
But it's in the book.
So that's who they would call me. And, people would call me. And because of that, I helped a lot of people to go through the system of incarceration and that kind of thing by doing spiritual work. And that came at a cost. And it's in the book. And the cost was that, the long story, short story, I got a gun pulled to my head.
Yes.
And shot.
And the trigger pulled.
The trigger pulled.
You said you heard the click.
Yep, I heard the click, and I saw my children's lives right in front of me. I was like, oh, no, I'm not going to die today. And I'm looking back, and I'm saying, my readings, and this is how, whenever I'm in the middle of any kind of thing, I'm always looking back at what my last reading said. Yeah. So I was thinking, no, my reading, they said I would die at the hands of violence, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not going to die today. But right now I see my children, and that's all I knew. And the man laughed. He laughed, and he says, next time it's going to have a bullet in it. Baby?
Yeah, you're right.
That there?
Yes. That was it. But I want to back up a minute, because you got to this place after leaving out of the village, being made a persona non grata, calling your mother, but being told
no help is available.
No help
here.
is available.
Yes.
And you're now on food stamp, but you also talk about the Jiffy
Mix?
The Jiffy Mix, where you went to collect
food
from the food bank.
Right.
But that when you got home, you recognized that that food was like a year expired.
And that's a normal practice. That's a normal practice. You have churches that run these food banks, and it's just write them off for tax exempt, and they just dump old things in there, and old clothes, all of that, and then people in need go there and think that they're coming up, and it's not. It's a system. So
Yeyefini, this was a very, very low point for you. You talk about when you opened the Jiffy pack, it was full of maggots and worms and so on. This is when you were at your very lowest. You're coming from being the head of you're a priestess. You're still a priestess. You've gone through a lot. You're now. Can I say that you were misusing the spirituality?
Yes.
Yeah, you were.
Of course.
Because Dr. Yeyefini was so you tapped into what you knew to make money, just to feed your children,
right? And that's without judgment. And I wrote it like that so that people do certain things to justify what it is that they need to do to wake up in the morning and look at themselves. And I pass no judgment. And that's why I put it in the book, so that you know that whatever it is that you're at your lowest, you're not alone. God will forgive you. God will show you the way out, just like God showed me my way out. And I shared how that Jiffy Mix.
Yes.
Until today, when I see it, I'm like, whoa, okay, you are a tool.
Yes.
You are a tool to my greatness. And from that, I came home, and that was the day that, it just seemed impossible. And I just gave up, and my head was just about to explode, and just depression and everything just came upon me. So that was the nervous breakdown was in front of my children.
And you talk about your home getting broken into.
Yes, broken into. And all of that. It was all during that time in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah.
God was just working, massaging me to develop the muscle that I would need to know that up, you mighty people, you will accomplish what you will. Come on, we are Garveyites. We have to do what is necessary. We have to accomplish what it is.
How did you get out of that deep despair?
Going to what I know, knowing that my ancestors are always going to be with me. And if my mother's mother came from Jamaica with nothing, and my mother is living in New York with everything, I know that there's something bigger than education. I know that there's something bigger than intention. It is the will of God that when we stand up, kneel down, whatever position you're in, and you pour a libation and you call on your ancestors, they show up.
Because you write about the importance of ancestors in the book.
Yes.
That's something that...
This is not about Orisha. Yeah. This is about ancestors. Yes. They are in your blood. Just like on one of them shows, it says, this is not your baby. This is what our ancestor says. This is here, my child.
Maury Povich.
Yes, this is your child. And when you pour a libation and call their name, they will come.
Yes.
This is not hocus pocus. This is fact. And in the book, I go into details about the things that I have seen, the things that I have done, the places that God has taken me out with just a libation, just calling on them and saying, this is where I am. Help me. I have nothing else to count on but you. They show up, and that's what's going to liberate Jamaica. That's what's going to liberate us as people, is that we can call on all of our ancestors. That's what we did in Haiti. That's what we did in Haiti, where we became the first republic. It's because they weren't begging these French people, can you please give us liberation? We went in the bush and we did the readings and we did the work.
And you also talk about rituals in the book, the importance of rituals, the importance of ancestors.
To the presence of God. So when you do a reading or you receive a reading, a consultation is done. A spiritual consultation is really like a consultation or investigation. You're asking spirit exactly what needs to be done, said, or say in a particular situation. And there are different electromagnetic energies that will trigger the direction that will give you the possibility of success in the thing that you're asking about. So our ancestors were scientists and are scientists. And we understand the power in nature. We understand the power, number one, in herbs. We understand the power of the word. We understand how to use our mouth, to use incantations, to chant, to sing. We know the power of going into trance. We know the power of disconnecting ourselves from everything that's happening around us and allowing God to use us, go through us, and make manifest its desire for what it is that we want. Remember, God is present in everything, everywhere. Everything has always existed. The fact that we can sleep at night and don't have to pay the rent just to breathe, that's letting you know that there's something bigger than you. The fact that your blood does not make a mistake and go in the wrong direction, it shows you that God is present. And so to energize yourself, to use the presence of nature or the world or the things, the elements that supports God or that God has placed on earth, for us to use as tools to connect, to centering ourselves, to be aware that God is present in us and God is present everywhere. That is what a ritual is. It's stepping into the unknown and using like a phone to tap into what it is that you want, the desire that you have.
So when we pour libation, it's science. When we pour libation, this is ritual.
Yes.
When we do the divination, this is ritual. The reading, this is ritual.
Yes. Yes. And so when we're using water, that is nature, right? It's a thing that we have more of in our bodies. So we're connected to the fluidity of our body and we're connected to the fluids of the universe, the rivers, the waters, which is the largest body of the mass is water. So we're connecting to that frequency and we're calling on that frequency. Just as if you pick up the phone and you're calling someone, you're not seeing the person, but the frequency is what reaches them. Like the people who are listening to us, that's frequency. That's what happens in a ritual. In a ritual, you're leveling, you're raising the vibration of what it is that you want to get from the universe, and then when you grabbed it, that process is ritual.
And one of the things you say in the book too, in talking about vibration and frequency, you say names are important.
Yes.
Because when you say a name, there are vibrations that come from that name. So one of the reasons why you rejected early one of the surnames that you had was that the vibration. Right. And how important it is. Along the way, your names were also you came into your name, put it that way, because this is how I see it myself in terms of understanding who we are. So that Yeyefini. What was the first name that you got? It wasn't Yeyefini.
Oh no, it's Folayan. Folayan.
Folayan. How come I never know that name?
Yeah.
Anyway, Folayan. So Folayan came. It came early.
Yes, the first African name I had was Folayan, and that was the name Mama KK gave me, and it means to walk in dignity.
Right, Folayan. How is it spelled?
Folayan. Folayan. To walk in dignity.
And then later on.
Then as I got initiated, then the name came up from the Odu, as I explained what Odu was, is how is it that the vibration that I am going to create in the world, the shrine that I am to become, the people that I am to work with, this name is going to be the vibration that takes me connecting to God, which is Yeyefini, which is Yeye is mama or mother. And Fini means purity or clear or the truth or honesty, all of those things. It's Fini. So you're talking mother of the truth, mother of dignity, mother of peace, mother of white cloth. Fini means pure, mother of purity. And that's one of the things that I wrestled with in writing this book is how can you be pure and not talk about the funky stuff that you have done in your life, that you have experienced, that you have done, that you have chosen to do as a way of reconnecting unknowingly to who you truly are. You are a vessel. You are a person that came on earth with a specific destiny. And all of us, that's the thing, is that the uniqueness and the power of God in its power knew every fiber of your body has an intention. It has a place. Not by coincidence that I was born in speaking Spanish. It's not a coincidence that I ended up going to Brooklyn. It's not a coincidence that I ended up coming back to Jamaica. It's not a coincidence that I am back in Jamaica here with my book, which started my journey into understanding, really connecting to the Jamaican side of me by doing rituals on this land that I don't know my family. All I know is they're from Westmoreland and they're Aiken and Ruddock. So if any of y'all up there, big up to my family.
Aiken and Ruddock from Westmoreland. That's you.
And me coming here, and I love St. Anne. So it's not by coincidence. That is ancestral vibration is bringing us. So my name means Yeyefini, the mother of purity. Efunbolade means the white chalk that we use in rituals. That later on we'll talk about it in the rituals that we did right here in Jamaica. Efunbolade, Efun give birth to honor or to the crown. So that's the name that came for me. My roots reading was Efunbolade, and when it came for my priestly name, that was the name Yeyefini. Of course, I've been initiated into other aspects of this faith. In Oshun, I have an Oshun name. In Egbe, I have another name. I have a Apollo name. I'm a priestess of different aspects of this faith. So I have like 6, 7 different names, but the name that I go by, there's my legal name is Yeyefini Efunbolade, which is the name that at my birth of initiation in 1971, which is that was the name that I use. And so I'm celebrating on 26th of August. I celebrated 53 years, and this is my week of celebrating my birthday, which was the 31st of August. So this is
true.
Yes.
Happy solar return, and we kind of didn't miss it, but you were in transit and so on. But Yeyefini, I think it is really important to underscore, as you have done in the book, that words are vibration. That when those books that took from Africa, for example. The compilation of what is known as the Bible took from Africa. It talks about in the beginning was the word, or the word was made. The spoken, the word was made flesh. This is our philosophy, cosmogony and cosmology, and every single one of them that we understand through patah, which is thought, and thought that. When the word is spoken, that the word it carries vibration. It comes at a frequency. It is made into flesh. So we can create our reality. We can create environments. We can create monsters, or we can create gods.
Yes.
It is with the tongue that we thought and tongue that we do these things. True. And you say this clearly in the book. You say names are vibrations.
Yes, and to add to that is that I didn't like my name. I didn't like what it meant. I'm a big mama. No, I'm 23. What? Yeyefini, mother of purity. That's a big title to carry. But as I worked it and I realized Yeyefini, meaning you have to tell the truth. Yeyefini, you have to do the things that is character building. Yeyefini, as you choose to do what is supposed to be done, then the vibration changes and it becomes who you are to become.
And so that the naming ceremony is something you talk about with the naming, the rites of passage.
Right.
And this is something that you used to do on the island here.
Right. I still do it.
Yes. I'm sure we miss you for that on the island. Because, all of us will come to you for that. The rites of passage, this is also important. The naming of your child when the child is born is so important. It's so important.
It gives them value. Yeah, and then when the reading of the child is given, a birth reading, is that you know who this spirit is. Why did this spirit come to me at this time? What is my responsibility? What's the responsibility of the community raised them? That's it. Because we will speak that over that child, and that's what the child will become.
So much more to come from our Queen Mother, Yeyefini Efunbolade, who's in the house with us. Her book is called The Living Shrine. It is available on Amazon and Kindle. You can get it by Kindle too. I'm sure many of you have purchased already since we're talking. But if you're going to buy it straight from Amazon, that's also something to do. All right, our sister in the house, The Living Shrine, Yeyefini Efunbolade, and we're talking about her book, but we're talking about also African spirituality, ancestors and ancestor veneration, rituals, and just Africanity. Because one of the things that has happened to us as a people is that we have been made to reject our African selves. And it is through this book this morning that, Yeyefini's journey to reclaim her African self in every form, spiritually, physically, name-wise, energy-wise, you name it. She has put it all down in this book, and we're discussing that this morning. Yeyefini, as I said earlier, we're going to be opening the phone lines at 9 o'clock. So many calls coming in, so many messages. But just to remind you, we're opening the phone lines at 9 a.m. so you can call in and speak directly to Yeyefini. Because this is going to be maybe half an hour that we have to kind of bring it all together. So one of the things that you ask is, where in the world is Yeyefini? We're always watching to see how that goes. But you through calling upon your ancestors through African spirituality, managed to, you were delivered literally from despair after leaving a polygamous village, was named persona non grata, and was literally left to die, if you will. But you refused to die. You had your children to care for, and you were going to do that by ancestors. One of the things you said in the book is, when your house was broken into, and when the gun was put at your head, you knew that you had to move out of that. That dragged you from the depression, from the mental breakdown, from all of it, and you made your way out. If we skip a bit, I know that you ended up in that process getting a beautiful space in which to function, which was what? In terms of your teaching?
When I left the village?
No. After that gun was put at your head, and you went through that process of, now I have to go. Mm-hmm. I cannot stay here. Mm-hmm. Who did you reach out to at that time?
Well, then I had to come back to my Africanness, and I went to the community and I reached out to the ancestors, and I said, there got to be more than this. I have to be in Charlotte there's more to this. And so, two things. I reached out to my mother, of course. By then the children were in high school, as well as I reached out to the community. And in the community, people started recognizing the things that I had been doing, because I still continued to do work in the community, working with children's programs and that important, teaching people how to pour libation, how to contact the ancestors, perform rituals. And they said, well, we need more. We want more of this. So then one of the things that gave me my first big money for me to really know that, wow, my ancestors are still backing me, was when we had the Ramesses from ancient Egypt, the Ramesses
the statue coming in?
Yes, came in to America and was touring. I was brought the opportunity to create the clothing. So if you saw the Ramesses exhibit in any of the museums, the clothes that went with the parades, I designed those and made them myself. And that was the ancestors bringing me back. Then I started working with different with the community leaders that we were working the children's African American Children's Theater. I started working there teaching. I started teaching at Davidson College, teaching African Studies. So I started coming back to realizing that you working in the world with people that are illegal, that was just you getting up on yourself to know that because you're left, that doesn't mean that God has left you. And so in bringing myself back to acknowledging that the ancestors and community is my key. Yes. Community is my key. And so I got community. I got a support system. I had elders to help me, to give me a support towards believing in myself again, that the ancestors, because I left the village, did not turn against me by leaving. And that was the creed, because I left my post, that the ancestors left me. Yes. And curses were placed on me. Public curses were made on me. And so my ancestors knew that I needed something really strong to bring me back. And so I became a voice in Charlotte. I was in the newspapers. I was doing all of that. When I called my mother and asked her, can she help me? Because there was the community, the house that I was living in by then had become so violent, the neighborhood. And I said, I got to protect my children. Humbled myself, called my mother. And she sent me some money, and I was able to move out of there and buy me a house, put a down payment of a house. So my family was able to help me there, and the community. I had the community, and then I went to Osiris community, started teaching me about education in terms of the food that I would be eating to become vegetarian and all of that. So it was always reaching out to community to those who could help me when I realized that the system that I was trying to help me gave me, Jiffy Mix that was no good. They were telling me that I was a failure. And I was like, no, I have to go within. And so going within meant connecting to meditation, connecting to my ancestors, connecting to the rituals, looking back at what my reading said that I would accomplish, and started doing the things that I know would give me strength. And from that, the rest, I just unfolded and just became bigger, greater. Then I started established the institute, started doing the rites of passage, which we call now self-empowerment intensive. All of that came in my many travels. I was ready to go to Africa to open up a school.
Well, let us stop there and talk about your travels, because earlier you talked about how you wanted to go to Africa at the moment that you got pregnant, and so that was shelved. But later on, you were able to go into Nigeria, and I know we've jumped a bit, but we're doing that by the book, because we've talked about if we go through the book chapter by chapter,
honey, we would be here.
They wouldn't need to buy the book, right? So buy the book. So at a time you were able to go. I'm going to put the three places in, and then I have you talk about them. To Nigeria, go through that whole process of initiation in Nigeria. You described that too, and some of the stuff that happened there, and to come into Jamaica and also Cuba, and how you were able to carry people into Cuba and led processes where people were initiated.
You put me on blast.
Yes, there you go. So let us talk about these travelers, because right now we're in the segment called "Where in the World is Yeyefini?"
Okay, where in the world is Yeyefini? Yeah. Well, it started with the Cuba, because when Obatala took me from the village, because that's the way that I reprogrammed my statement, is when Obatala took me from the village and said it was time for me to expand myself. And the children and the Osiris said and all of that, I established a good connection with Osiris said, because my parents and the parents of the head of the Osiris said knew each other. We're related, and spiritual relationships from we were in Panama. So that became a catalyst for me to be able to. But Cuba opened the road for me to start doing initiations, because I didn't have anyone else to help me, and initiating a priest requires a whole number of people to help you. And so I went to Cuba, of course, based on a reading. I went to Charlotte. The lady told me she had relatives in Cuba, knowing that our descendant in the Lukumi system was from Cuba. I went to Cuba, and the doors were open to me, and I was able to initiate people and start initiating people in Cuba, because in that process of going to Cuba, then we had the little funny thing that you couldn't leave Cuba to go to the United States. Yes, so Jamaica became my jumping off point that you could come. I hope they're not going to come get me.
No, but that's what we all did that, there's so many of us who did that, really, because of the embargo,
right,
and the sanctions that the U.S.
and
had
so
played
because of that, that's what Cuba became a place for me to really to continue my training and expand my training, and to meet people who were fostering me and helping me and supporting me and over the years, a number of people that I took to Cuba for initiation and initiated people over there and that kind of thing. So that started. So in the process of that initiation, global explosion of me initiated many, many people. And I've had always initiated people in the village. I have many, many students that, when we say initiated, place my pot on their head and says, this child is going to inherit my spiritual gifts. That's just a small way of saying it. And so in that process, then, the Osiris Set community was going to Africa, wanted to go to Nigeria. They had been going to Ghana, wanted to go to Nigeria. I said, okay, so we can go. So we went together. They brought me the ticket, and we went to the Osiris Set. When we got over there, I had met one of the people, Baba Eluyemi, before, and so when we came to Ghana, when we came to Nigeria, and the the king of the Osiris went with me, it created a big buzz because there are people that saw me because we went up north to the Durbars and to a lot of
and
places.
you're right about how going into Nigeria, how it was a phenomenon, even for those who were in Nigeria, because here you were coming in. Well, you went to the Osset Society. They were going in with the Kemetian way,
and they wanted to come in.
You were coming in with the Yoruba thing.
Yes.
And there was this phenomenon where, wow, you're coming from the U.S., haven't never been here, but you're coming with the Orishas and Obatala.
And they saw my tribal marks. Yes. That was the thing. They said, you're a Yoruba woman. I says, yes, but I practice Yoruba. He says, you're born here. And as a matter of fact, I always have a joke that a lady in Ile-Ife got into an argument with me, which I couldn't argue because I don't know enough Yoruba to have an argument. But she insisted that I was one of her relatives that lived in another side of. I told her it's not me. She says you've changed your way of speaking because you're hiding your truth. We went through it. The poor lady had to come and say, no. She's one of the African people that enslavement took over there. And she broke it down. Mm-hmm. So when I came, it was the phenomena. I was in the newspaper. I've even have the articles to today that this phenomenon came from America. She brought this king who we never heard of, committed thing. That's not your but this lady here, blah blah blah. One thing led to the other. On one of my various trips to Nigeria, it came up in a reading as usual, and I ended up going to visit the shrine of Oshun, and in that people came out and they was throwing themselves on the ground and saying that that they was told that I would return, and I'm like, okay. And so in the long run, I was initiated to Oshun in Oshogbo, and that then led into a whole nother thing. Going back again, mind you, before the initiation, as a priestess of Obatala, I went to meet the Oni, Ile-Ife, the late Oni, Sijuade Keji, and he passed many years ago. A few years ago, not many, but I'm trying to speed through it so you can read the book and get the context in which I'm speaking.
It's all there in the book, actually. Yes.
It's in the book that how I ended up being the Iyalode of the United States, meaning the Queen Mother of the United States of the United States, and that was something again that Spirit ordained because I was minding my own business. I took some students because I started taking students to Nigeria and students to Cuba, and just doing the work that I do. And so in that one of those, that was when the title was bestowed upon me, that the Oni said that from this day you will be known as the Iyalode, the Queen Mother of the United States. I'm like, oh, that's too big for me. Mind you, when I got initiated, they said that I will go to Africa and find wealth and wisdom. That was the words, wealth and wisdom. And I could not go when I was first initiated because I didn't have anything to give to Nigeria. I was pissed because I'm like, the only reason I came to be in the village is to, get initiated because I'm having this baby, and then I was going to Africa. And they told me I couldn't. I was like, oh my God. But when I went, it was wealth and wisdom. I was given land. I have land in Nigeria. I got, I don't have it anymore because I didn't go back to finish the process because I didn't have the destiny was not taking me there. I was given land, title, all of that to say that, Yeyefini, if I continue to do the work of God and showing up as a priestess of Obatala, as a custodian of the culture, and showing people in all of my works the mystery and the power of ancestor and the power of nature and the power of God, then everything that I ever wanted would be bestowed upon me. Who to that little girl running around in Panama trying to figure out why she don't like herself, who ended up being entitled and all of that. I don't use the title like that because for me it's just
yes, stuff. And I do understand that, but it's important to outline the process and to say, along the way what has happened.
So that took care of
these
Cuba.
titles were given to you.
Yes, yes. It's nothing I went over there to buy. I was not like that. So when we did the, so that take care of Cuba, and that took care of, you said, Nigeria,
of Nigeria and Africans, but also one of the most critical things for us here on the island is that we remember you as someone who was in the space as our Queen Mother, one of our Queen Mothers, as a Yoruba High Priestess. When you said Oshun, enough we never hear that word yet. You African. Remember, you used to come in the studio to explain to us. It sometimes takes an hour to say. All right, so. I said, Yeyefini, you have to come in and tell me about the pantheon of Orishas. I never said Orishas. I think I said the Godhead. And you said, okay, in Christianity it is a Godhead. So you're going to come now and this is what you're going to do. And you brought us through that. And one Sunday we talk about Shango, and another Sunday Obatala, and another Sunday and we were talking about the shrines and so on. But you took your time. It was a process to get us to understand that, because we had to have a paradigm shift on this island to get rid of all the devils that we had in our minds, and to refill ourselves, and if you will, reprogram our minds to our African consciousness. And this is why I want to talk to you a little bit now, before we go to the phone lines, about your time in Jamaica, the work that you did here, because in addition to all of that teaching and the rites of passages and so on, you were doing some serious spiritual work on this island. So let's talk about it.
Well, the spiritual work started way back before we met, because the other day you asked me how did we meet. We met at in Brownstown when we were doing work with the UNIA.
No,
it was before that.
No, because I remember that. Let me tell you, I asked you and you go think about it. I would have thought about it too.
Okay.
So it was our Nigerian sister who was living in Tanglewood. Do you remember that sister from Nigeria who was living in Tanglewood in St. Anne's Bay? She called me one day early in the early 90s, something, or something like that. And she said, I'd interviewed her many times. And so she called me one day. She said, we have a sister. Her name is Yeyefini. You have to meet her. So she introduced me to you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So
you don't remember
you got the
her.
correct. You got the correct one.
I don't know how you don't remember her.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember her name, but yes, it was sister. She was from Nigeria and she lived in Tanglewood.
Oh wow!
So,
okay, so
I took you to the Brownstown UAIA meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yes, so I couldn't even remember. Look how long that's been. Oh my God, that's donkey years.
Yes.
So anyway, so what was the question again? I took off the topic.
Times in Jamaica. Let's just talk about your time in Jamaica.
Okay, so it started way back in the 80s when I first came to Jamaica with as invited with Lantonette, who is a Lakadko dancer, and I came here and we were doing some as a guest, and spiritual and friendship and all of that went with it, and spiritual connection.
And Lantonette is also a Yoruba.
Yes, priestess of Oshun, and so. It started then, and then there was a break. And when I came back, when we met on a consistent basis, then the work that we did was totally connected to. And let me take this moment to just thank each and every student that I had, each and every person that has ever done anything to help me, give me a piece of bread and encouragement, allowed me to dry my tears with their toilet paper or whatever it is that I did in Jamaica to help me to where I am in my life. I just give thanks to you for the connection that your ancestors and my ancestors had while I was here in Jamaica, and the impact that you had in my life, the places you took me, the places that I come to know of myself, as well as the topography of Jamaica. I give thanks for the work that we did together, we shared together. And so in doing my spiritual work, the ancestors knew that there was a connection that I had to do to come back here to do. And I started doing the classes. As I said, I wanted to open up a school here. And the school didn't happen. I ended up learning about the SEI and going to caves and doing all of the things that exposed me and opened me up to people who trusted me to guide them in spiritual path, give them African names and that. And so the work that we started doing here with IrieFM was to go. You started something that we were going to go to all of the parishes and invoke and give praises to their ancestors once we had had the connection with the remains that were taken to Ghana. Mm-hmm. And so we started working together, you and I, as is going, and you said you wanted me to be a part of the programs in terms of coming and pouring libation. Well, through readings, it became more than libations. Mm-hmm. So I had to go undercover and do the rituals because Jamaica wasn't ready for the word ritual, let alone seeing it. Mm-hmm. So my part is not to always be the obvious. Yeah. Ritual is secrecy. Ritual is energizing the energy of the universe without people saying, "Oh Lord, look at that," or shame, or your intention is not clear. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it requires secrecy so that the energy that is being dispelled at the moment that we're using the herbs, plants, and the different animals and things that we have to do to invoke spirit is done in a way that is understood when we're doing it. There's a place for classes, and then there's that. So I used to do classes and that up in Kingston. But when it comes to rituals, that's the part. And so when IrieFM would come and say, we would like you to do this here, I would come, do the reading, do the ceremonies, do the rituals. And then when the physical manifestation of it came, the people were just unbelievable because it wasn't about Yeyefini. It wasn't about Kabu. It was about the ancestors wanting to make themselves manifest to remind us that we have the power to change the circumstances in which we live in. And so it's not by coincidence that now, just as the book comes out, I'm here speaking about the same thing with you. Everything is organized, and it's not by coincidence that my ancestors are Jamaican.
It is as it should be. I want to take a quick break because we're at the 9 o'clock. And in between the telephone calls, we'll talk a little bit more about the Jamaica situation.
Yes, please.
There are a few things you write about. I think maybe I'll come back before I take the calls. There are a few things you write about in the book that really stood out to you. One is what happened at the waterfront, and then at the caves in Clarendon and so on. So let me take a quick break and come back. So, Yeyefini, in doing the rituals across the island and the atonement, because one of the things that we went on was this journey of atonement, and also the idea that we understood clearly that so many of our ancestors had died, were killed on these lands viciously and violently, and that between land and water, that the cleansing that needed to be done, the atonement that needed to be done, and the tribute that we needed to pay to those ancestors, that you were right there going with us through the island for that. And one of the things that you write about in the book is some of those points where these things, the results really stood out to you. One was at the pier, downtown Kingston, and you write about things that I didn't even remember happened there. But that for you meant something. Talk to us about what that was like for you.
Yes, knowing the power of ritual and knowing the power of spirit, it always brings you to a place to acknowledging that you're not crazy. It always does.
Yes.
And so, because when we look at the dominant culture, you're supposed to believe in everything that you see. And that's a game, because you don't believe in what you see. Trust me, you don't believe what you see. What you don't see is what you need to believe in. The underlying factor and the vibration. And so one of the things that we were going to do was to bring the atonement and the healing of those ancestors who perished, jumped in the water, did some of everything to make sure that our history would not be forgotten. We went there and we poured the libation the night before I just felt so calm. It was just like one of those moments. I don't say aha moment, because aha is just like you get it intellectually. You just feel like you're at home and everything is okay. It's just going to be peace. And so we did the ceremonies. The next morning we came out and we started the ceremonies. I started chanting. I invoked the ancestors. I asked them to come to manifest themselves. And I remember it like it was just this morning. I said, come ancestors, and show us your power. Show us that you're not dead. Show us that the way for us to understand the power of the ancestors and the struggles that we're going through on the island, and the struggles that we will be going through on this island, that we have the power to change it. Come and show us that you're not dead, that you're alive. In that moment, somebody said, look, the water red.
I remember hearing
yes,
that.
And I turned and the water was red and it got choppy, and people started rushing to see it and to wash it. And in the pushing of it coming, I'm being pushed to the wall. And so in between me being pushed to the wall, somebody starts crying, and she's like in woos, like, in kind of like in slight possession. And people started crying and just reaching out. And one woman said, bless me, Yeyefini. Yes, me, bless me, bless me, Queen Mother. And then Efunbolade.
And quite a few people were coming to you with that request.
Yes.
Because of what was happening in that moment.
Yes, once I brought the white chalk and I started touching and people started feeling the energy, then people just started rushing to me.
And some people were fainting too.
Yes.
And so that was a highly charged moment, a spiritual moment. We remember it with the kind of somberness that you hear Yeyefini talking with, and the same kind of somberness in my own voice, because that was a moment that we'll really never ever forget.
Never forget.
Grown men were crying.
Yes.
Grown men were hollering.
Yep, I will never forget that.
There, downtown Kingston.
And we had so many dignitaries, and then there was like, they were in the same space. Nobody didn't get up and say,
all the ministers of government were there.
Yes.
All the politicians, the private sector, the academia. I mean, it was a massive occasion. It wasn't, we probably don't now talk, those who were there recall what happened. It's something. And this was done across the island. And this is one of the reasons why I say, I hear people calling for this to be done, that this has to be done. But this has been done. And it's for us now to ensure that we teach our children right.
Yes,
and that we maintain, and continue this. And this was, and Yeyefini, remember we went also in St. Anne's Bay across from Seville on the side, the seaside there, because we did some of those rituals there. You were doing some of those rituals there. Also at Cranbrook Estates.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes, yes.
Rituals were also done there.
Boy,
anywhere there was a river, anywhere water was running, we understood that we had to go there.
Yes.
And we went there in the name of Oshun.
Yes.
And who else?
Yemonja.
There you go.
Yes. We were doing the works and privately doing the works and publicly manifesting the ancestors.
And we were also in the caves.
Yes.
Let's not forget the caves.
Yes, the cave. Yes. That was a whole nother kind of experience. I have all of that is in the book.
Yeah.
The effect of it, the feeling of it, the somberness of it, of how this place here called Jamaica, it is a vortex. Trust me, it is a vortex of spiritual awakening. That's why people love it. And the people who are here cannot ever give up. Don't let the dominant culture make you feel that if you're drumming your drums, if you're chanting, or if you're down at the water, if you're wearing your locks, that is something wrong with you. Do not focus on that. Focus on the fact that everyone in the universe, I don't know what is the latitude of this island, the scientific latitude. I don't need to know that. All I know, this is a vortex that when people come here, they're awakened. They're awakened to something other than themselves. So make sure that we're doing the things necessary for it. Number one, do not give up on yourself. Number two, do not give up on your legacy. You come from greatness. Is not by coincidence, by the so many powerful people and things have a generation, a cultural identity and skin and birth and water that come from Jamaica. This is a vortex, and anything that we want to do, set it in stone. And trust me that through a reading, doing a ritual. Remember, we used to do the reading of the year. Every year I come and say, what's the ritual? What we're going to do? And, to make sure that we're using this vortex. Don't let other people, other culture come here and buy up everything and tell you where you can't live. With spiritual ritual, you can own everything. I told in my book, very vaguely, how my own Orisha pot shrine was taken in Jamaica. Taken from my home. But then I recognized that was not God. God is in me. And the shrine, before it left, had already manifested itself in another shrine. That's magic.
Yes.
That's science. That's Orisha. That's God. Letting you know that there is nobody on earth that has more power than you. The only time they have more power than you is that you give them your power.
And we're going to leave it there and go to the phone lines. The Living Shrine, Yeyefini Efunbolade. That's the title of the book, The Living Shrine. And we're going to be...